You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and that charm, just like Jim. It's more than life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag
For what?
with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more than life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club,
Why?
buy some bottles, impress them girls.
what?
It's more than life.
Oh, fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat? And I'm Ethan. And I didn't know if it could get worse than the Ravens game. And I guess it can always get worse, but I don't know if this was necessarily worse or just embarrassing. But at least with the Ravens, at least they were a good team. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they were just a bad team, and still, even with them being a bad team, they still embarrassed the Saints, and that's what was bad about this. And the Saints still didn't put up any fight. That's what was embarrassing about this, and that's what made this worse than the Ravens game. Because at least with the Ravens game, we could at least say they were a better team. The Pittsburgh Steelers weren't a better team. And I guess you can still say maybe it was the injuries, but I don't know. So let's get into some of the breakdown of the game and some of the stats. So can I get a menu? And this game started just like a lot of the Saints games. The defense comes out, gets a stop, forces a punt, and what do the Saints do? They punt. They had 6 plays. They punted right back, but then the second drive for the Steelers, they go on like a 12, 13 play drive and cap it off with a George Pickens end around. I think it was like an end around touchdown. Yeah, like a 1 yard end around touchdown, 1 yard touchdown by George Pickens, who's actually a wide receiver. And they score a touchdown to take an early 7-0 lead. And then the Saints get it right back and only convert like 1 first down, and then just give it right back to the Steelers. And then the Steelers go on just a short drive and get a field goal. And before you know it, just in a flash, it's a 10-0 game. And then they just punt it back and forth. And finally, the Saints get a little something going. They get their three points, and just like in every game, it seems like the Saints are only able to get anything going at the end of halves. It seems like it's that 2-minute drives are the only time the Saints and Andy Dalton are able to block and get anything going, and that's when they finally get something going, is on the 2-minute drive. And they finally get something going there and end up capping that drive off with a 15-yard pass to Juwan Johnson. And like a fool, that actually got me back invested in this game, because then it was 10-10. And I think really what had the bottom fall out of this game is the Saints were already dealing with 2 injuries on the offensive line in this game, because Andreas Pete, and who's the left guard, and Eric McCoy, who's the center, were already out in this game. And then I never even saw when it happened. They never even talked when it happened. They never showed a replay of when it happened, and they didn't even talk about it early on. But I guess Landon Young started the second half as your left tackle because James Hurst, I guess, got a concussion at some point in the first half. So then you're down three starters on your offensive line because it looked like there towards the end of the first half, you were able to get a field goal. You got something going at the 2 minute warning, the 2 minute drive. So it looked like they were finally getting something going. But then once you got three starters missing on your offensive line, the Saints offense and their defense is already missing so many starters. I mean, what are you really supposed to expect them to do? Missing that many starters, their offense was just completely inept after that. They just couldn't get anything going once they lost James Hurst, their left tackle. So then and I didn't even know that James Hurst was missing once the second half started. So I was actually kind of excited because I was like, okay, it's 10-10. They get the ball first, and then of course they get the ball first, and what do? They go 3 and out. So it's like, oh well, that was completely wasted because I actually had hope that maybe they're going to get the ball first and maybe they can actually take the lead here. But of course that didn't happen. And luckily the Chris Boswell, who I was talking about during like the injury report earlier in the week, how he had like that's what I thought was funny was they actually classified his groin injury as a right groin injury. So they were playing with a replacement kicker. Trying to see what his name was. Wright. I don't know what his first name. Wright, I guess. Something right. He was playing with a backup kicker. He was actually keeping them in the game because he missed like two field goals in this game, and that actually kept them in the game a little bit because he missed. That wasn't even a very long field goal. It was just a 39-yarder. So the Saints went 3 and out, and then the Steelers actually went down the field and got in range for a 39-yarder, and actually for once a team missed a field goal, which could have put them up 13-10, and then the Saints, of course, get the ball back and with just in a couple plays they punt it right back, and then the Steelers had an amazing punt. Finally, I think this was the first punt all year that was inside the 10 from Blake Gilligan. Blake Gilligan's been very underwhelming this season after a great rookie season. This is the first punt all season that's been inside the 10-yard line. Pinned the Steelers inside their 10-yard line, had a coffin corner punt that put them inside their own 10. And still the Steelers marched all the way down the field and were able to get in field goal range. And they were able to kick a field goal, a 33-yard field goal. And still, I mean, we're talking about how bad the defense was. I mean, the defense was still, I don't know if it was because I don't think it was because the defense was good. I think it was more because the Pittsburgh Steelers were bad. This is like I was saying to begin with, the Steelers just weren't good, honestly. So, and their kicker was missing kicks, so they were still able to just hold after they went on that long 98-yard drive. They were still able to hold them to just a 33-yard field goal, and then this pretty much was, I think, the nail in the Saints' coffin. So the Saints still were in the game at this point in the fourth quarter was on the second play. It was a 3rd and 5. Yeah, a 3rd and 5. Andy Dalton goes to pass, and it gets tipped up in the air. It actually hit Jarvis Landry in the hands. It gets tipped up in the air, and it gets intercepted by Damontae Kazee, and that was just pretty much the nail in the coffin, because they were actually moving the ball a little bit there. Well, actually, no, they weren't. But it should have been a first down, is what I was trying to say. Because Jarvis Landry should have caught that. Should have caught it for a first down, because it would have been a pretty big game if Jarvis Landry could have caught that. So people were expecting Jarvis Landry to come back and do something after he's been gone for so long. And then, of course, he comes back and doesn't help Andy Dalton at all, having a ball clink off his hands for an interception. And then, of course, a few plays later, the Pittsburgh Steelers pretty much put the nail in the Saints' coffin and get a touchdown and make it 20-10, and that's pretty much over at that point. So just not a good game, not an enjoyable game at all. But let's just go over some of these stats here for the Saints first. And Andy Dalton definitely underwhelming here. And he was 17 for 27 for 174 yards, for 1 touchdown, the 2 interceptions. And he was, even with the offensive line playing so bad, he was only sacked 2 times. I think they had a lot more quarterback hits than sacks. He was still knocked around a lot more than that. I think he was just getting rid of the ball quickly and things like that, with a 23.9 QBR, 62.9 quarterback rating. And then the run, obviously, because they were down majority of the game and the offensive line was so beat up, they couldn't run the ball at all. But still, even when you're down so much, you should probably attempt to run the ball more than what they did. Alvin Kamara only had 8 rushes for 26 yards with a 3.3 yard average. He had 1 big run for 14 yards. And at one time, they actually had like Jordan Howard rush on first down. And then even on like the 4th and 1 play, they tried to sneak it. And I don't know why you wouldn't, even if you're going to try to sneak it, why wouldn't you have Taysom Hill in there and try to sneak it, or have Taysom Hill do a quarterback power and try to pick up the 4th down? Like, I don't know if is Taysom Hill's rib injuries worse than what we think, because he only had 3 carries for 1 yard. So even with the carries that he had, he's ineffective. So people are crying that Taysom Hill didn't have the touches. You can cry that he didn't have the touches, but even with the touches he had, he wasn't effective. And then he had 1 pass attempt that wasn't completed for obviously 0 yards. So you can cry about him being ineffective, but he hasn't been doing much with the touches that he's been getting. And then Juwan Johnson was your best receiver today, and that's bad when Juwan Johnson's your best receiver, even though I guess you do finally have Jarvis Landry back. But Juwan Johnson had 5 catches for 44 yards and a touchdown off of 7 targets. Chris Olave Andy Dalton out here throwing hospital balls to him. He got lit up twice in this game. One of them actually helped them get the touchdown on the 2-minute drive, but man, he sat there on his butt there for a good 30 seconds. You could see that he was dazed. He probably should have been in concussion protocol after that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with defensive backs and defenders all wanting to take Chris Olave's head off. Or did he say something about somebody's mama or something? Or do defensive backs have something with a problem with Ohio State receivers or something? Like Chris Olave, he needs to get bigger. He's kind of fragile. And there was one pass earlier in the game when the Saints, I still don't think the Saints had any points at this point, on a deep ball where Arthur Millette was able to strip it away from Chris Olave. And this has happened a couple times in games where Chris Olave has drops. And I think I saw a graphic somewhere where it showed like Chris Olave only had like 2 or 3 drops on the season. I've seen him drop more than 2 or 3 passes. Like he's a great receiver. He's got like the most catches and receptions of any rookie receiver on the season. But with these big hits he's taken, and he gets kind of bullied by defensive backs, and he has a kind of a drop problem from when he gets hit and gets the ball stripped out of his hands. He needs to get stronger hands. He needs to bulk up a little bit because a receiver that he kind of reminds me of a little bit is Terry McLaurin, who's really good. But Terry McLaurin is like the same height. He's 6 foot. Chris Olave 6 foot, but Terry McLaurin weighs 200 pounds, but Chris Olave just weighs 190. So if Chris Olave could add about 10 pounds of muscle, I think that would probably help a lot with this drop problem he has, and these defensive backs being able to lay these big hits on him, I think would probably help a lot. But Chris Olave only had 3 catches for 40 yards, 0 touchdowns, long of 14, and had 5 targets. And then Jarvis Landry had 3 catches for 37 yards, 0 touchdowns, a long of 17, and off of 6 targets. And of course, the one that clanked off his hands for an interception. And the Saints were getting pressure in this game. I think that's probably why they were actually kind of able to hold the Pittsburgh Steelers down for a little while, and also because of the missed field goals. They actually had six sacks in this game. Malcolm Roach had 1. Caden Ellis had a big one on 3rd down to knock Kenny Pickett and the Steelers out of field goal range. Granderson, Cam Jordan both had a half a sack, shared a sack. Hano Passanio had a sack. David Onyemata had a sack on 3rd down. I think that was on 3rd down to force the Steelers to kick a field goal. Chris Harris Jr. had a sack. So these all went by the wayside, though, because they were giving up a lot of rushing yards in this game. So they were getting sacks, but they were giving up a ton of rushing yards in this game. P.J. Williams was your leading tackler on the day. Had 11 tackles, 9 solo. Caden Ellis was probably your best player on defense, though he was kind of all over the place, especially with that big tackle, big sack on 3rd down that knocked them out of field goal range. They were like around the 35-yard line, I think, and his sack, he had like that 10-yard sack that knocked them back to like their own to the Saints 45-yard line that knocked them out of field goal range. That was like one of the biggest plays of the day for the Saints, honestly, was that play. So there's kind of some of your stats for the Saints, and look at some of the stuff that the Steelers did to the Saints. Kenny Pickett, he didn't really have a great day, honestly, because of the amount of times he was sacked and his completions to yards. He was only, but with how he's been playing, this was probably one of his best performances because like some of the commentators were saying, like, the Steelers don't need to draft another quarterback. They already have their franchise quarterback. So with how bad the Saints were playing and how good they were making the Pittsburgh Steelers look, they were saying that the Pittsburgh Steelers had found their franchise quarterback. Like if a team was playing bad or been looking bad the week before, all they got to do is play the Saints. The Saints are a get right team for teams. I swear, it's terrible. It's embarrassing. And Kenny Pickett was just 18 for 30 for 199 yards, a 6.6 average. He was sacked 6 times for 37 yards lost, only a 45.5 QBR for 79.7 quarterback rating. But this is where this is where the Pittsburgh Steelers chewed the Saints up. And I had mentioned how Najee Harris had been having a bad season, and they talked about how Najee Harris needed to be improving. He had one of his best rushing days, games of the year against the Saints. He had 20 carries for 99 yards, almost had a 100-yard game against the Saints for 5 yards a carry. And this is where it got embarrassing for the Saints. He had a 36-yard long. They said the Pittsburgh Steelers hadn't had any runs over 20 yards all seasons, and the Pittsburgh Steelers had 4 against the Saints. Kenny Pickett had one of 23 yards. Jaylen Warren had one of 21 yards, and George Pickens had one of 22 yards. Like, that's just embarrassing. Like, the Saints are a get right team. They had a problem. They fixed it on four folds, 4 times. Not back to back, but back to back to back to back. They were able to fix that problem. And so even Kenny Pickett got in the mix on that because he was their second leading rusher. He had 8 carries for 51 yards, 6.4 yard average with a touchdown. He picked up a big 4th down conversion on one of their scoring drives. It was on like a 4th and 2 sneak. He picked up 2 yards on a quarterback sneak, which is ridiculous. You doing a quarterback sneak on when they need 2 yards, that's ridiculous. That's embarrassing. And Jaylen Warren had 9 carries for 37 yards for a 4.1 yard carry. George Pickens had those 2 end arounds that were killing the Saints. One was for the touchdown. It was just a 1 yard gain. But those end arounds, the one was for 22 yards. Man, they were just getting killed on those plays. They gave up some big plays through the air as well. Deontay Johnson had 4 catches for 63 yards, a long of 36. Jaylen Warren's had 3 catches for 40 yards, long of 26. So they gave up 6 plays of 36 yards or of 20 yards or more. That's embarrassing. And the Saints had 0 plays of 20 yards or more. Like, God, that's just that's embarrassing. Uh, it doesn't get much worse than that. And still the Saints only lost by 10 points. I'm surprised the Saints didn't get blown out when you look at that. And the kicker's name I was looking for, Matthew Wright, was the kicker. And that's part of the reason, because Matthew Wright was missing field goals. The score probably should have been more like 26-10. That would have been a more fitting score. Should have been 26-10. That sounds like a more fitting score for how bad how many explosive plays the Pittsburgh Steelers were getting and how many explosive plays the Saints weren't getting. And then on to the defense. The one player I highlighted that ended up showing up was Alex Highsmith, because I talked about how he was the leading sacker for the Steelers coming into this game, because he had 6.5 sacks. Well, that's exactly what he did. He ended up having 2 sacks in this game, and the Saints only gave up 2 sacks in this game, and that's who got both of them. And he had 5 total tackles, 3 solo, 2 sacks, tackle for loss, and a quarterback hit. And they gave up another quarterback hit to TJ Watt as well. And I predicted that I thought TJ Watt was going to get a quarterback hit in this game as well. I haven't got to the hot takes just yet, so I'm getting to that a little early. But he didn't do that. So let's see. Arthur Millette, he used to play for the Saints. He had 3 total tackles, 2 solo, and the pass deflection on what I call more of a drop on that deep pass that went to Chris Olave, which would have been a big play early on in the game against early on in the game. But I would have called that more of a drop than anything. And then the 2 interceptions were caught by DeMonte Casey, and then pretty much the game sealer was by Levi Wallace. So, man, just pretty much complete opposite stats for the most part. Great stats by the Pittsburgh Steelers, awful by the Saints. And then just, our boy Dennis Allen, just in this press conference, he just looked, this is really the first press conference where he looked pretty much just defeated. He just pretty much the same kind of stuff, that they just kind of need to work on things and need to get right. There was plays to be made, but there was just no energy in this press conference that he had after this game. Like, the way he was talking about it, you wouldn't even believe that he believed in himself, or he believed that the team can turn it around himself. I don't know if he even believes that there's any chance that the Saints can save their season, or if he can even save his job with the way they're playing and the way he's coaching this team. And besides all the Saints injuries in this game, I think a good part of the reason that they played so bad is obviously the coaching. They had 10 plus penalties. They had like a ridiculous amount of penalties, close to more than 10 penalties, close to 100 yards or something in penalties. in this game. Just awful with the amount of penalties. Like I want to say like 14 missed tackles in this game. That they were just terrible in this game. So I mean, that stuff like that is directly related to coaching. Like you just can't ignore that, and that's something that's been going on like all season. And they talks about that didn't mention this necessarily about cleaning it up, but it has multiple times in previous press conferences, but it hasn't gotten better. It hasn't gotten better. If anything, it's gotten worse game to game. It's gotten worse. And maybe you can contribute it to backups and injuries. You got like pretty much practice squad players in there at this point, but it's coaching. That kind of stuff's on you. The penalties and the missed tackles. I mean, he talks about the missed tackles, how that's on like technique and want to and stuff like that. Well, aren't you the one that teaches the technique and being in position to make the tackles and almost being in position to make the tackle? Like, weren't you the defensive coordinator when they were so good the last couple of years? Like, what happened now that you're the head coach? I just don't get that. And he was also asked, this was a weird question also, like when he was asked the question about like if they're gonna make like a quarterback change, he was asked about like Jameis Winston, you know, and he kind of mulled around the question and I kind of outright came out about like whether Jameis Winston was healthy or not, and kind of said like, "Oh, it's possible we could go back to him, but don't know if he's healthy or not." And that was something that Jameis Winston said a little while back about himself, that he doesn't know, like he would be willing to play, I guess, but he's not healthy or whatever. Even though when you see injury reports, he's not on the injury list, but Dennis Allen said that he doesn't know if he doesn't think he'll be 100% healthy this season or not, but it's something that they have to consider. It was just weird that he would almost put a player out there like that. Like I don't know, it seemed kind of disrespectful to put a player on blast kind of like that, if that makes any sense. Like kind of deflecting by putting it on the player to whether they want to play, you know, and put it blaming their injury. I don't know. It was just an odd response. I don't know, but on to my thoughts about whether Jameis should play or not. Like, I at this point in the season, with what I've seen from like Andy Dalton and whatnot, like I said after the last game when Andy Dalton missed Marquez Callaway on the touchdown, which could have made the game at the end of the half in the Ravens Baltimore game, the Saints Baltimore game, to make it 14-7 at halftime when he missed Marquez Callaway wide open in the end zone. That I'm pretty much over Andy Dalton. Like I kind of don't like him anymore at this point. So like, of course, I would be okay with going back to Jameis Winston, if nothing else, just for the excitement, because like it's clear that Andy Dalton pretty much has like nothing to offer at this point. With the offensive line being as bad as it is, with obviously Michael Thomas isn't coming back at this point. With the offensive line playing as bad as it is, the run game is like non-existent now. Like, might as well go back to Jameis Winston, because at least he can maybe push it down the field to Rashid Shaheed. He can push it down the field to Jarvis Landry if he doesn't, at least maybe if he doesn't clank off his hands for an interception, and he can force it down the field to Chris Olave. Maybe don't lead him into danger and hospital balls. But if I was to put myself in Jameis Winston's shoes, would I actually want to play for this team with it being in the state that it is? Because if I was in his position, I don't know if I would actually want to play for this team with the condition that it's in, missing 3 offensive linemen, no run game, me not being 100% healthy. I don't know if I would want to go out there and put out another bad performance with myself not being 100% healthy, because that could lead to me making it harder for me to get a job in the future. Because if I'm Jameis Winston, I know he technically signed a 2-year deal with the Saints, but I don't know if Jameis Winston will technically be with the Saints next season, but he could possibly be interviewing for another team next season. So going out there and putting on another bad performance would not be good for his career. Or besides that, going out there playing behind a shoddy offensive line and getting hurt even more would be bad, because he's already dealing with the broken back, the ankle, the hip. So what good would it be to go out there and play? So if I'm in Jameis Winston, I don't know if I would even want to play for this team. But we all know Jameis Winston. He's a dog. So and he loves this team. So it's really be interesting to see who the quarterback ends up being for this Saints team this Sunday come against the Rams. And whoever it is, I kind of feel sorry for him going up against the Aaron Donald and the Rams. And I feel sorry even for that offensive line for having to attempt to block for them. But going forward, it should be very interesting, not in a good way, because watching this team right now is not very fun. But I think that's all I have for you. And with that, can I get a check, please?